Welcome, everybody, to the fifth episode of Unpacking Software from Chocolatey Software. On the third Thursday of every month at 4 p.m. UTC, you can find us here on this live stream, chatting about the latest news and opinion in the world of software, focusing on packaging, software deployment, and lifecycle management. We also make this available as a podcast, which you may be listening to right now. We have another live stream on the first Thursday of each month called Product Spotlight. This is where we spotlight chocolate products, discuss releases, highlight features, and walk through tutorials and demos of the products. To ensure you get notified of all the great content from Chocolatey Software, ensure you join our community hub on Discord, subscribe to us on YouTube, or follow us on Twitter or X, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Facebook, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're on all the things, and you can find the links for all those things on our homepage, chocolatey.org, or in the description. Just scroll all the way down to the bottom of chocolatey.org and you'll find them there. We want to make sure we hear from you about the content we're producing. Is it what you want to hear? Do you have ideas about what you'd like to see? Have your say at ch0.co/stream survey. And you'll also find that link in the description. And it's also on screen if you're watching us on the live stream as well. My name is Paul Broadwith, and I'm the Technical Engineering Manager here at Chocolatey Software. And I'm going to bring on my two co-hosts. Today I'm joined by them, both of them, our Principal Software Engineer, Gary Ewan Park, and our Customer Solutions Manager, Stephen Valdinger. Thanks for joining us today, guys. So let's just rock it in to the news. And today we're looking at a couple of things we've actually looked at previously, but the first one we I think we picked up in April. We chatted about it, and it's about Microsoft removing the harmless, and we've got in quotes, CoPilot app that was quietly installed on your Windows PCs, maybe also your Windows server. So yeah, we mentioned this back in April. Microsoft silently installed the app onto Windows servers, which is absolutely fantastic. It's just what you need when you're having a look at your server, making sure all the software is up to date, and suddenly you find the Microsoft chat provider for Copilot in Windows listed in there. So that was rolled out as part of a Microsoft Edge update back at the end of April, as I said. Stevie is a former sysadmin, person that manages these things. What do you think about all of this? I have my own opinions. I'll keep them to the end.
I'm not surprised that they yanked it so soon because there was a lot of outcry when it happened. And I wasn't particularly fond of the decision and that it was there. And it was a sneaky little devil too because it wouldn't show up in, the traditional add removes programs window. It only showed up in the modern settings apps thing. That's the only place it showed up. So I'm not sure how like easy it would be for detection even. Um, so yeah, trying to figure out if it was there or not. Like, is that a problem? I don't know because I don't do a lot with the modern apps thing. Traditionally, I look at the old school programs and features thing. But yeah, as a sysadmin, don't don't just willy nilly put stuff on my box without telling me. At least put it in some sort of a notice or something that I can subscribe to, or something. Um, Delivered as a Windows update so that I can see it in my canary rings before it hits my production boxes. Do something. Like, I don't understand it. I don't understand it at all. So I'm glad to see it go away.
Gary, have you got any thoughts on this before
I mean,
I shake my head?
from it just it it's not a good look. I mean, I'm not saying that there was anything nefarious about it, but the fact that it came through as an Edge update, the fact that an Edge update has removed it again, it it doesn't provide much in the terms of visibility, as Stevie said, in terms of being able to know that it was on the box and being able to see it come down through the kind of well-known and established pipeline for how those things get onto your boxes. It just feels a bit icky, to be honest. And yeah, I'm glad they've taken it out, but who knows what will happen in the future.
Yeah, I don't know what I really don't know what to say about it. It astounds me that people are not jumping up and down about this. And
Mm,
the app itself was fairly benign and harmless. I think it was like 8 kilobytes. It didn't really do
Yeah.
anything. It was a kind of mistake. And I get it was a mistake. I get all of that. But the problem for me is if you're managing, if you've got let's say 1,000 servers in your organization, Microsoft is effectively managing them for you because at any time they can just start installing software onto those machines. Now, if you're using Windows Update, you're effectively expecting things to be patched. You're expecting bugs to be patched, CVEs to be patched, maybe some features getting rolled out. That's all fine and dandy. But when they start installing software onto these machines as well, that's a huge problem for me. Microsoft should not be managing my Windows server. Microsoft should be patching the system. And I just find this whole thing really problematic, and I really don't understand why people are not jumping up and down about this
mm,
problem. That they've basically gave the management of their Windows system over to a third party, effectively third party in terms of their organization. I understand Microsoft owns the operating system, and they're just licensing it to you. But in the respect that you're an organization, Microsoft is a third party, and I just find it so problematic. And then, as it's been mentioned as well, this was rolled out as a Microsoft Edge update. Microsoft Edge is a browser. What's it
exactly.
doing deploying this software onto me?
Yeah.
The whole thing just baffles me. It really does, boggles my mind. Really boggles my mind. Um, and some of the the words that have come out of Microsoft as to what they're doing about this. They have rolled it back. That's cool. They admitted it was a mistake. That's fantastic. But that just seems to be about it. Is this the world we now expect for technology?
Mm,
That people just do these things and that's it, and we just move on. I really want to rant about it. It really makes me very angry. Coming as a former system administrator, that was my background. I've talked about this before. I've worked in operations for a long time. It really blows my mind and it makes me very angry. But there we go. We are where we are, I suppose. It's so yeah. If you want to remove the Microsoft Chat Provider for Copilot and Windows from your servers, please install Microsoft Edge Update version 126.0.2592.56 and off it will disappear.
well, you sometimes
So,
need a reboot in order for it to disappear completely.
Well, the
So
instructions I
just be
think say
careful.
to restart Microsoft Edge if it doesn't appear. But yeah, there was I think as well a suggestion that if it's still there, do a reboot and
Yeah,
see if it's there. Which is another problematic thing because you just can't reboot production servers
that's
willy
true.
nilly.
That's
So
true.
I just again like Paul, just stop. I'm just going to stop now. So
AI is
that's
here to stay.
it. Oh yeah, even on your servers.
Hmm.
Awesome. Awesome. So moving swiftly on to another saga, Broadcom and VMware. It's the gift that keeps on giving for, but not for VMware customers clearly, but it's a gift that keeps on giving for Broadcom. I think. But what's happened now is they've ended their what's the best way? They've ended their licensing with AWS to stop to stop the reselling of VMware Cloud in AWS. That's what I was trying to say. See, this whole Copilot thing has just thrown me for a sec. Um, so now that they've stopped that, they've ended the right to resell that in May. The on-demand use for that. So if you've got a VMware set up and you want to buy additional provision, let's say from AWS, because you're in the mornings, let's say everybody's coming in, you need more compute. So what you would traditionally do is just buy that from AWS in a kind of on-demand fashion. Let's say it would be up for 2 hours, then it would go back down again, and everybody's happy. That's going to stop. As we know, Broadcom is wanting to turn everything into a subscription. And because on demand is not a subscription model, they want that to stop. So it's the AWS isn't happy about it, understandably. Broadcom is probably really happy about it because they're going to get that new subscription money from everybody, which is exactly what they're looking for. I what are we what's going on with VMware and Broadcom? Gary, talk to me about this. What are your thoughts on all of this before I
So
continue to rant again?
So I went off and I read about. So I'm a little bit confused. I'm not an IT person. I am a lowly developer, right? So help me out here initially. What is VMware Cloud, and why am I not just provisioning VMs through AWS directly? What does VMware Cloud give me that I don't get through Azure or AWS or Google Cloud Compute? Help me out there to start with.
Stevie, do you want to take that? Do you want me to?
Sure. So I think one of the big advantages of going VMware Cloud, particularly if you are shifting from doing VMware on premises to VMware in the cloud, all of that workflow doesn't change
Okay.
particularly. Like you can still vMotion boxes between vCenter servers. You can still do all this stuff in the cloud. It's just more scalable in the cloud, right? Because it's a cloud. They've got all that infrastructure already sitting there. If you need more, you just pay for more, and as you need
Gotcha.
less, you pay for less. Now, me as somebody who might be affected by this, oh my goodness, VMware Cloud's going away, blah 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 blah. I'm going to shift to Elastic Beanstalk and get the same thing, but use AWS native services instead,
Mm,
which is problematic because that is a lift and shift of how you're doing things, right?
okay.
It's a completely different model, a completely different control plane on how that stuff works. So
Okay.
functionally, it's a big deal for the end user, but I think AWS might actually stand to make money off of Broadcom's decision here because companies that don't want to give Broadcom 100% more money to keep using VMware Cloud will re-architect what they're doing to use an AWS service that
Yeah.
costs a significant portion less. Especially if they like do reserved instances and pay for things up front and things like that. There are ways to save money with
Yeah.
AWS if you know you're going to spend money in AWS. The same way that there's a way to save money by doing the same thing in other cloud providers. Like you can reserve things in Azure and GCP just the same you can do at AWS. So,
Okay. So with that context, then I sort of feel like Broadcom are maybe shooting themselves in the foot in terms of I'm obviously using VMware Cloud for a reason because it's what I'm used to, or I've got other in-house assets that I want to be able to just spawn them up in a cloud infrastructure. But I might have ties specifically to AWS because that's where I run all my stuff, or I might have ties to. So I don't understand why Broadcom would want to allow continuation of VMware Cloud in Azure and or Microsoft and Google, but not in AWS. It seems a little bit constraining, and I'm sure there's a good reason for it, but it just feels, as Stevie said, that folks might just run off and do things in a native way, um, going outside of VMware Cloud and doing it their own way. So yeah, I don't understand. I don't see any good reason for doing it, to be honest. But I'm not a Broadcom CEO, so I obviously don't know the ins and outs of it. But it does seem like they
maybe they're
are
testing the
shooting themselves in
waters.
the foot. Possibly.
Maybe they're going to see how the dice fall with the AWS decision, and then roll it out to Azure and GCP later. Be
Maybe.
like, okay, it went well with AWS. We're
Yep.
going to pull it from Azure and GCP as well. Or it could backfire, and they'd be
Yep.
like, okay, never mind.
I mean that's a good point. Something we never mentioned at the beginning is you can still have on-demand use if you're a Microsoft or a Google customer, Azure or GCP. It's just not AWS. Now I don't know whether the Microsoft and the Google licenses are got a time to run and then they will expire and then it won't be available for them or not. That's not made clear, but it seems to be at the moment. It's as you said, Stevie. Maybe they're dipping their toe in the water and saying, "Well, how's this going to go?" But I think with everything AWS, they're not. AWS are not a small company. They don't take these things lying down. And AWS has already started inviting its customers to discuss its migration services, away from VMware infrastructure,
Mm.
completely understandably. So I don't know whether AWS and Broadcom fell out over terms, money, or
I think
whatever.
it must be. Yeah.
It feels a little bit like that. But again, at the end of the day, what happens is who's the one that actually suffers? It's not AWS. I mean, they're going to make a little bit of money, but they'll make money elsewhere. It's customers.
Yeah.
Customers are going to suffer now because of potentially a spat between a cloud provider and whatever you would class Broadcom as, a software hardware company. It just feels that again, it's all about money. It's all about cash. It's all about trying to get as much money out of people as possible. And this has been a trend since VMware was taken over by Broadcom. And I appreciate that they want to go to a subscription model, but they are, because their customers are the ones that are suffering through this.
It's the point that Gilbert's making in the chat there is that customers are probably going to be likely slow, or companies will be likely slow to migrate as well. So they're banking on them paying for that money until they decide what they're going to do. But everyone's always got stuff to do. You can't just throw this sort of migration in and expect it to happen tomorrow. There's going to be that time frame where they're going to have to pay for it until they can shift everything, if that's what they decide to do.
There's also companies that their licenses might not expire for 3 years. They might have had a license with VMware prior to Broadcom, and they've got 3 years left to run on it. So you might not see the amount of money disappearing from VMware quickly. It might be a trickle until it reaches that point where everybody's either on a subscription license or everybody's gone. So it's got a little bit of time to run. But there was a report in the article, when we post all the links to the articles in the description or wherever you find this. But there's a report from a company called Chocolatey Software found that 76% of North American VMware customers were concerned about Broadcom's impact on their business, while 73% of them expect prices to rise by at least 100%. You can spin this up how you want, and you can wrap some corporate speak around about it, and it all looks great on paper. And I'm sure the shareholders are loving all of this. But again, customers are suffering through this. Despite the corporate speak that's coming out of Broadcom, it's very, very clear that customers are the ones that are going to suffer in terms of cost, and whether that might be direct costs with licenses, or it might be incidental costs, because they're going to have to pay for all the engineers, contractors, additional infrastructure that as they move away from VMware. And I think going forward as well, Broadcom has really tarnished the brand that was VMware. VMware was a solid product. It's always been a solid product, but now I really feel that the brand has been really, really tarnished, and we're going to left with it being a kind of enterprise type product rather than an across the board virtualization product. So, okay, I've calmed down a little bit now, so we're going to move on now to some Chocolatey news. So Chocolatey recently announced 3 billion downloads for the Chocolatey Community Repository, and I'm going to pop the link for that onto the screen in case you're not aware of Chocolatey. Obviously, we're all from Chocolatey Software. The podcast and the live stream is from Chocolatey Software, and the Chocolatey Community Repository now has been running since. What has it been? 11 years since we started counting. I think it was 9 years to get to 1 billion, thereabouts to get to 2, and about 18 months to get to 3 billion downloads. Moderation was put in place. So again, if you don't know what moderation is, it's where the packages that are coming in and submitted are looked at, examined, etc., before they're published. So that was 2014. So we've been around a long, long time, but 3 billion downloads is a huge number. I think at one point we were sitting watching it, and it was going between 2 and 2.5 million downloads per day for products. So sorry, not products, for packages. So that's awesome. So I don't know what the date of that was, because someone grabbed me the date of that actual 3 billion downloads. I didn't write that down. While we're waiting on that, maybe I'll sing a little song. 31st of May. See, right at the end of May. That's fantastic. It's only 21 days ago, that happened. So again, we'll post all these links in the description. So it's on our blog. Did I put that on the screen? Let me put the blog. There we go. It's blog.chocolatey.org. And you'll be able to find these posts on there. Another one, and Gary, I'm going to turn to you for this particular one, is announcing the release of the Chocolate CLI, Chocolate License Extension, and Chocolate Agent. So it gives a little brief overview of what went on there.
Sure. To answer the question in chat, will there be 3 billion download swag? No, I don't even think that's something we considered, to be honest. but maybe we should have.
We should have.
But no, but the answer is no. There is no specific 3 billion download swag. Maybe for 4 billion will be a
I was
lot
gonna say,
more.
somebody take a note for 4 billion.
If it keeps going the way it's going, that won't be too far away.
No,
So,
exactly.
anyway.
So yeah, I mean, we did a live stream 2 weeks ago, Paul, where we went through what was contained within that release. So that was a release both of Chocolatey CLI, Chocolatey License Extension, and Chocolatey Agent. The long and the short of it is, there's a very prolific community contributor who had racked up a series of pull requests, and I got to the point that I was annoyed that they were sitting there. So I went through and took all of the Cake is a Lie's PRs, put them all together, and made a release out of it. We then stuck a couple of things on top of that, and then we shipped that. So we've shipped 2.3.0 of Chocolatey CLI, which includes a number of new features, as well as improvements to its existing functionality. There's quite a bit in there. So I'd encourage everyone to go back and watch the live stream that we did. Paul and I effectively went through the release notes and said, these are all the new things that are there. Off the back of that, there's lots of ideas about what we want to do within the next release. So it set things off percolating in terms of what we want to do and how we want to do it. So no, it was a good release. There were some hiccups along the way. Let's put it that way. That's enough to say on that. But we got there, and happy that it's all out the door, and a lot of people have downloaded it already. And there hasn't been, touch wood, much in the way of feedback to say that we've broken stuff. So overall happy with the release. So if there are any questions about it, feel free to reach out.
It was actually you and James that were on that live stream, not me.
Oh, so it was. You were away.
Yeah.
That's right.
Sorry, James.
Sorry, James.
I remember.
Sorry, James. I do apologise.
So that was when was that? That was the first Thursday of this month. So would that have been the 4th, 6th of June? That would have been.
Yes.
6th of June, that was.
Sorry,
and you'll find a recording of that on our YouTube channel. youtube.com/Chocolatey Software. Again, if you go to chocolatey.org and scroll all the way down, you'll find all the links to all our things at the bottom there, including our YouTube channel. I've also put a link to the docs on the screen. If you're on listening on the podcast, that'll be in the description. But you can find the release notes for all of our products on the documentation as well, which is the docs.chocolatey.org. And finally, a blog post that was only published today, talking about we're reintroducing Hyper-V for the Chocolatey test environment. The Chocolatey test environment is what we use internally for the package moderation services. So they use that to test the packages and moderate the packages in various different ways, whether it's the verifier or package scanner. And what we've done is the last version of that was released, which was version 3, actually removed Hyper-V as a provider, vagrant provider box type for that test environment. And that was for good reasons. But we've been wanting to really get back to it and bring the Hyper-V provider back, or box provider back, for the Chocolatey test environment, and we've done that. That's actually been published today. So if you want to take the Chocolatey test environment for a spin, test your packages, and you do use Hyper-V as opposed to VirtualBox, and there are reasons you would do that, many reasons, then you can download that from our Vagrant hub. I think they call it a hub still, our Vagrant hub. But if you go to the blog post, again, will be in the description. You will find the link for that there. Okay.
The only thing I mentioned, and it's mentioned on
Uh-huh.
the blog post, is that there are a number of limitations using the Hyper-V provider, mainly around networks and private networks. So there is a link in the blog post that goes off to those limitations. So if you're happy with those limitations, absolutely continue using it. But there's things you might need to do to work around other parts of it.
Awesome. And just to be clear about that those limitations are Vagrant and Hyper-V limitations.
Oh, absolutely.
Not,
yes.
Limitations on the box. Yeah.
Right.
So it's just Vagrant and Hyper-V. There are limitations using that. So, yeah. Okay. So moving on then, and moving on, we're going to actually talk about some open source news. Chocolatey products, or a few of the Chocolatey products are actually open source products. Your Chocolate CLI, Chocolate GUI, are actually open source products. And so we work a lot with GitHub, and we try and very much, as Gary mentioned, just there, that the last release of Chocolate CLI was through a lot of pull requests from one particular maintainer. And what we've looked at for quite a while is how can we actually bring in giving people as much credit as we can for the contributions they make to our open source products. And as part of that, there's been a kind of contributions and credit policy put together. Again, link will be in the description. You can pick that up. And Gary, I just wanted to, somebody's been heavily involved in open source for a long time. What do you make of that policy? That is it something that we could bring into how we do things here at Chocolatey Software?
Oh, I definitely think we should. I mean, so I went and read the article once we started talking about it, and the upshot of it is there were things in there that I hadn't considered, but once I read them, I'm like, oh, I can see why that's a problem. So an example would be, let's say someone opens a PR and does some work, but then for whatever reason steps away from it, and then somebody else wants to take over that PR to get it over the finish line. Who do you accredit with that work? Is it the person who raised the PR initially? Is it the person who rebased it and fixed it up based on feedback requests and then merged it in? Do we give it to them, or do you give it to the person who actually merges it in because they've been responsible for testing it and doing all? So there's all sorts of these questions that I genuinely hadn't thought about, because to me it's like the PR was raised, you do some work, there's a little bit of back and forth, you merge the PR and you give the cake as a lie the credit for doing the work. But there was things in this policy that said that you have to think about these things, and if you don't have them documented, then you're in a position where, well, where can you point people to know what they can expect? So the whole point of this policy is that you document, and or rather you think about all these things, you document how you as a project want to deal with it, so that then there's a standard to work with to then be able to say to people, this is what we do and why we do it. So no, I think it's absolutely something we should put across all of our projects. Most likely we'll do it as at the organization level so that everyone can see it. um, Steve, you maybe grab a link for the chat. They're asking for a link to that document. You can maybe put it in chat. So it's absolutely something we should do. One thing that we had you and I spoke about this after the last release, Paul. But one of the things that we want to do is we want to start putting information about the contributors for a given release into our release notes, so that we can vocalize to everyone who was involved in it, i.e., who created the issue that sparked the conversation, who did the work in doing the PR. So we absolutely want to do that. Now, one of the tools that we use for generating our release notes is called Git Release Manager, and there is actually an active PR that I'm on the hook for getting back to getting a review of it, that adds contributors directly into the markdown that is the release notes. And that was one of the ways that we were going to start letting people know who was involved in the release. Because we looked at, when I showed you a temporary draft version of it that was generated with that tool, and it clearly showed that there was, I don't know, there's like 30 or so contributors to the release, because it was capturing who was involved in who created the issue, who opened the PR, etc. So yeah, that's one of the things I want to be able to scream from the rooftops, to say that all of these people were involved in this release. But this article was more about documenting and making it clearly documented what the policy across all these things were. So yeah, it was an interesting read, and I absolutely think that we need to go and do something with it.
Yes. After all
All of that.
Yes. Not all of that. Yeah, as you said, we've talked about this, and it's something that we want to do. It's really important when people make contributions that they get credit for it. But as you said, there's a lot more to think about, not just, hey, you put in a PR. Well, as you said, what if you step away, etc. So there's a lot more involvement, and it's good that this was put together and allowed us to kind of think about some of those things that we would probably have thought about later on. But it's good that we can now think about them earlier. So yeah.
And once you actually get through to the GitHub repository for this contributing policy, then it's they're very much dog fooding it, because they've got a contributing policy to contribute to the contributing policy. So it's very meta, and it's all wrapped up in a nice little bow, so they can see how it all works. So yeah, it was an interesting read.
Maybe think they've planned it.
Maybe.
So another thing in open source as well, if anybody is kind of old, actually, I don't know if it's that old. It was about in the 2000s. So what would you need to have been? Yeah, okay, maybe 30s, middle 30s, 40s. Anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about. Winamp. Anybody knows what Winamp is? Winamp was the greatest thing on Windows. It looked like it was born in the 80s, even though I actually don't know when it was released. But yeah, it's announced that it's open sourcing or opening up the source code to enable collaborative development of its legendary player for Windows. So Winamp is a company, which I didn't know. I actually thought it was just a couple of people hacking this together. But yeah, anyway, so they're going to open source all of this. Stevie, did you ever use Winamp? Is it just me?
I used the crap out of Winamp, and actually, I just put a link in the chat over on Twitch, so it'll show up everywhere. There's a website where you can see all of the old Winamp skins, and I found a bunch of the ones that I used to use when I was running Windows every day, and a teenager, and music was life, and I'd use a little equalizer and try and tweak it just right, and in my mind it was making a difference, but in reality the 2.1 cheap speakers that I had on my computer were not changing at all because they just couldn't. But it was really cool. I used Winamp all the time, and I didn't realize how big of a company it actually was until I started digging into this. They have a lot of tooling available if you're a musician, right? If like making music is what you do, they have a lot of tools for helping you to distribute that music onto the various streaming platforms for making sure that you get credited, that you get paid for that stuff. They've got a platform for content creators like doing YouTube videos and stuff like that to have royalty free music that you can embed in your videos. So they do a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't realize they were doing. And of course, they still make Winamp, and they have mobile apps nowadays because everybody listens to music on their phones. But I think it's really really cool that they're going to open source the actual Winamp software for Windows, and maybe they'll open source it for all their platforms. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to creating a Chocolatey skin for Winamp once it goes open source.
Now, what's the most disappointing thing of everything you just said there is I didn't see that coming. And I don't know why I didn't see that coming. That was fairly obvious that you were going to go
Yeah,
and create a chocolatey skin for that.
yeah.
I
Actually, it's gonna be a PR in the Choco theme to allow you to. Yeah, yeah. It's fine.
Well,
It's
James is
fine,
asking a
Paul.
very asked a very important question there. Is that going to be the classic brown color scheme for
Oh
chocolatey,
no no no
or is
no no.
that going to be the blue
The new blue
chocolatey?
one. Yeah, the new blue one because I can't see brown very well.
There you go.
but you could do both,
I could
and
do. I
because
could do like a blue background and then like brown sliders. Yeah,
yeah,
I've got a whole vision. Just wait. Just wait.
just make sure there's plenty of beige in there as well, and it'll be fine. Yeah, if nobody knows what we're talking about, the original design for the chocolatey website was a kind of beige brown affair. If you go into the Wayback Machine and go all the way back for chocolatey.org, you'll find it. And it's a colour treat for the eyes. It really is. It's a
It's
delight.
really something.
It is. It's really something. So
So
yeah, if you're
the
bored,
question
do
I
that.
have about all of this, sorry, what is the importance of the 24th of September 2024? It's quite a specific day that they're open sourcing it. Does it mean something?
I don't
Or
know. I really don't know.
It's also a Tuesday. I thought maybe
I
it's a
mean,
Friday and it's just the end of the week, but it's not.
is it because it's like 24/9/24 or something, or 9/24/24?
Oh,
is that a thing that
I
I'm
don't
missing?
know. I
maybe it's when it was born.
Yeah, maybe
I don't
maybe
know.
the original
Um,
Winamp came out on the 24th of September.
It just
I
seemed a
don't know.
bit specific, the date.
Yeah,
So
it
That's
is
the point. I never
weird.
picked up on that.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on it either.
don't know.
Yeah, it's all the Murder She Wrote that Gary watches.
That's what it is.
It's the investigative mind
That's right.
that's going on there. Okay. Too much information. So we'll move on now. From Winamp, which was back in the day the best thing ever, to the end of an era. Microsoft, this was never the best thing ever, but we'll go with it. The end of an era, Microsoft phases out VB script for JavaScript and PowerShell. I don't know whether, actually I do, I was going to say whether to cry or not, but I do know I won't cry because I never liked VB script. Stevie, did you ever use VB script?
I used it in some macros and stuff in like Excel, but that was not a lot of. Sorry, I just had a kid walk into the room. Yeah, I didn't really use it all that much. Like that's not a language I ever picked up on. Most of the stuff when I was getting started was a lot of PHP, but I didn't do a lot of VB script stuff. And like I said, really only when I was doing some weird macro thingy or something in Excel was where I would use it.
Gary, I know I'm going to regret asking this, but did you ever use VB script?
So similar to Stevie, actually, it was more VBA. So VB script
Yeah.
for applications that I was using
Yeah.
heavily for Excel. I mean, in a previous job, we abused Excel. I mean, we had Excel macros that were calling out to web APIs to do stuff based on what you put into the Excel spreadsheet, and it was a beast. So I've used it for that sort of stuff, but I can understand why it's being phased out. JavaScript and PowerShell, they've kind of become synonymous with the web technologies and the Windows stack, so it makes sense that they're deprecating VB script in favor of those. It's the way things are going to go, I think. So from my point of view, it's not unexpected. There is an interesting kind of related to that. I mean, it speaks to the longevity of things that exist in Windows. So VB script has been around for a long time, and the timeline that they're expecting for it to still be there, it just speaks to how long Windows keeps these things, or Microsoft keeps these things around. You look at the VB6 runtime, it still ships in Windows 11 because there are so many applications that are dependent on it. So it's good to see that they've projected out when and where it's going to be and how long it's going to be available. It gives people a chance to switch over.
Just talking about that timeline, it was first introduced in 1996. I didn't know it was that old. That even makes me feel young. And it will be deprecated in 3 phases. So the second half of 2024, it will be available as on demand in Windows 11, but it will be switched on by default. And then sometime in 2027, it will still be available, but it will no longer be enabled by default. So you could still use it right up until 2027, and then they've just put, and in quotes, sometime in the future, it will be gone. But there's no date being put on that yet. So maybe, you're talking about 2024, 2027 is 3 years. Maybe we're talking about 2030, another 3 years after that. I've obviously just made that date up, but it just shows that at that point it will be around for 34 years. So it's been around a long, long time. And if you want to learn something new about one of the Chocolatey team, Scott has actually just said he used to teach VB script when he was a college professor in 2007. Now that says many things to me. First of all, I didn't know he was a college professor, and second of all, I didn't know he was that old that he was a college professor in 2007. So there's many things coming.
Or that he made text-based games.
Yes, that was
script.
Yeah.
That's the real catch-all there.
That's the next message that he left. Yeah, it was the best thing. It's for text, and the next one after that says "not kidding." So yeah, it's things you learn.
Does he have his own version of adventure? Is what I want to know. Like,
okay, maybe Scott, you can let us know.
Yeah.
That in the chat, that would be awesome. So yeah, things you learn about Chocolatey, episode 1.
Seemingly, there's
Okay.
a bit of controversy regarding the Winamp thing as well, according to Unsalasi, regarding it might be that they're looking for people to contribute to it, but not release it under an open source license. So I didn't read any of that. I didn't
Oh,
notice any of that side of stuff in the articles
I
that I
didn't see
read, but
that.
it's certainly possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't read anything about that in there either. That would kind of make sense. They're going to release it as open source, but obviously open source has many licenses now, and they could be restrictive. So again, it maybe makes sense. People can contribute to it, revive it, bring it back, add modern features, what people are looking for today, because obviously the landscape today is very much different from what it was back when it was released to begin with. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see where it goes. So I'm still glad they're releasing it under an open source license, even if it is
Yeah.
restrictive. But yeah, um, and just to tie this whole thing up, just reading here, Scott has just said that the text-based game was the final project that to write for VB Script. A good way to engage students and teach them intro to programming. So yeah, I suppose so. But yeah, I think the most important thing for that for me, Scott, is that I didn't know any of those things about you being a college professor, etc. So that was the interesting part. So yeah, cool. Okay. So yeah, that's going to disappear. But such is the way of things. JavaScript and PowerShell has kind of replaced it anyway, so it kind of makes sense that it's going away of going going away to the farm. I suppose we could say
The
with the
great
other
beyond.
with the other programming languages. Okay. So talking about programming and programming languages, ChatGPT answers programming questions incorrectly 52% of the time, a study has found. So what the people who produced this study had done, they took what was it, 517 programming questions from Stack Overflow, and they fed them into ChatGPT, and 52% of the answers contained incorrect information, but were preferred 35% of the time due to their comprehensiveness and well articulated language style. So even though they're wrong, people liked the way they were worded and used them anyway. So programmers didn't always catch the mistakes, so they used them in actual code and overlooked that 39% of the time, meaning there's code out there, likely in production, written using it. So, yeah, Gary, programmer, what do you what do you think of this? Yeah, again, I'll
I
rant.
mean,
I'll stop.
I can honestly, it's not a surprise. I mean, at the end of the day, this model is based on textual input, and it's making inferences based on the model that it has had generated for us. So is it going to be correct 100% of the time? No. Is it going to be correct 48% of the time? No. Um, so I've long thought this whole all of these large language models for the purposes of coding are great as a discoverability tool. You want to quickly say to it, how do I do a for each loop across all of the objects in Active Directory? Then that's something that it would be able to give you a starter for 10. And then with that starter for 10, you take that into your IDE, you tweak it a little bit, you make it do what you want it to do, etc. Would I ever trust it to take an exact copy of um, some code and that I've asked it to generate and stick it in and assume that that's right? No. But then the same could be said for answers from Stack Overflow. Should you trust the answers that someone's put directly into a Stack Overflow question? No. I mean, people are fallible. You need to own that code. You need to make it fit your need, then have tests to back it up, or an infrastructure that you can test it in and make sure that you do. So no, I've always seen these LLMs as a tool that you can use to get to where you want to go, but it's not something you would want to trust for everything. So no, this is not a surprise to me. A little bit surprised that the 39% of people didn't pick up on mistakes that were contained within it. That's a little bit concerning, but um, that's yeah. I don't know what to say about that.
Is it concerning though? Oh, well, it's concerning, but is it a surprise? Really?
It's a big number. It's a higher number than I would have liked it to have been, but Yeah.
I don't find it surprising, the number itself. But Stevie,
So yeah, I agree with the comment that just came through from one of our people. It's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes, good start tool. Should never use it out of the box. Stevie, I think you've used Chat GPT
I
quite a
have.
lot. How do
I
you get on with it?
I definitely agree that it's wrong a lot, but it gets me really, really close. And I'm confident enough in my skills that I know that I can get it over the line, and I do get it over the line once I get that initial nudge. But it saves me a ton of upfront time, like figuring out the methods and things that I need to use to do the thing. Where, like, the other day I was working with new spec files in XML and trying to manipulate that stuff. So I asked ChatGPT, "Hey, I'm trying to do this in this XML, help." And it gave me the methods that and the classes that I would need to do what I wanted to do. And that even kind of opened my eyes to, like, there are classes to deal specifically with the namespace of an XML document and like all this stuff that, yeah, I probably in the back of my head, it makes sense that there would be classes and stuff for that, but in that context, I never would have thought to use it in that manner to help me manipulate the XML in a way that doesn't shoot me in the foot later. It made it really, really robust and really, really reliable in how it ultimately generates the XML code that I needed. So it's wrong in that when it is wrong, it is confidently wrong, right?
Mm.
It is like, oh, this is exactly what you need. And then I go off and I run it. And then I come back and I say, actually, no, it gave me this error. And it's very apologetic because it's like, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. It would have to be this. And it gives me another thing that you go off and you run it and it's still wrong. So there's a lot of that. It gives me a lot of stuff up front. I save a lot of time up front in like understanding what classes and stuff I need, but it probably takes me more time going back and forth with it, explaining the errors. Sometimes, not all the time, not all the time, but sometimes you get into this cat and mouse race where it's like, okay, you're giving me a little piece of it, but it's not there yet. Um, but it is going to get better, right? We're still like
Hmm.
super, super, super early days in this AI stuff. And even from where it started to where we are now, it's leaps and bounds better than it was. So I'd be interested to have this conversation again in 6 months and see what these percentages are then.
Hmm.
Because I think we're going to start to see it swing to where the percentage of being correct is actually higher than the percentage of being wrong. But I think we're just still early yet.
Yeah, a lot of good points. I just feel that these are tools. They're there to kind of help, as you've said, Stevie. They're there to help you get towards the solution, rather than potentially just give you the solution. So you can, you ask it questions, you learn a little bit, you refine your question. A bit like
Hmm.
Scott has mentioned in the chat as well. Feeding it queries is an art, and if you keep
Yeah.
refining your query till you get to the core of what you want, you possibly get there. But it's these LLMs are effectively garbage in, garbage out. If you're going to give it garbage, you're going to get garbage back.
Hmm.
But and again, they sit on the internet, and what do we not do to anything on the internet? We don't copy and paste it directly into our code and expect it to work, or believe anything that's on the
Yeah.
internet. Go and research,
Yeah.
do your
Agreed.
research yourself.
Yep.
But yeah, as you said as well, they're going to get better, and they're really nice when you say to them, "No, that didn't work." But remember, I think it was Terminator 2, where they taught Arnie how to smile. You know, AI can smile too. Yeah. So okay. So moving on, we've got a couple left, and what have we got? We've got 10 minutes, so I think we've got plenty of time. This one has been all over the internet; it's been everywhere, and it's another Microsoft one. I promise I'm not bashing Microsoft today. It's just happened to be that these two had come up. and they were important to talk about. But you probably already know what it's going to be. The new Windows AI feature takes screenshots of your desktop every few seconds. That in itself sounds absolutely amazing, and I would love to have that on my machine, because I'm sure everybody would. Um, it's called Recall, and it's only available on CoPilot Plus PCs. So these are another new thing that every time I read about AI, it still surprises me that people are continuing to go down a road building a solution to something that I genuinely don't feel a lot of it exists. There seems to be solutions to problems I never knew existed. Certainly don't exist for me. So we need the Copilot Plus PCs now. They've obviously got their own chipset, etc., for local AI processing. Um, but yeah, this is a feature that takes screenshots of your desktop every few seconds, so that you can then say to the AI, "Can you find me, as an example, can you find me the tweet I was looking at on Monday?" So it can go back through and have a look. And, oh, well, you were looking at these tweets. And we, oh, fantastic. That's great. I can find it. Again, I would probably go through my browser history and find where I was looking at Twitter on there. But apparently this is a thing that people want to find out. But it's obviously got huge privacy implications. In that if you're storing screenshots of your screen every 5 seconds, then that's a hacker's paradise right there. You're looking at your credit card account on your browser, and it's taking screenshots of that. It's got all your account information in there. Something that I was reading in another article, not the one unfortunately we're linking to down below, but it has also legal ramifications as well, because for organizations where perhaps they've been subpoenaed by a court to say we need to get, sometimes you get subpoenaed for emails, for example. Next thing they're going to subpoena, look, I want to see the machines, over this period of time. Or something else that was brought up was if you've got abuse in the home, where a partner is wanting to see what's been done on the machine, potentially people chatting to that kind. There's all sorts of ramifications for all of this stuff. And again, I think we're looking a little bit at it. This is a great idea. I can find out the tweet I did on Monday. Yeah, but once the genie's out of the bottle, it's too late by that point. You've
Yeah.
already opened all of this up to a huge amount of other uses, most of it nefarious. So I'm not sure, in my personal opinion, I'm not sure whether this is worth the risk. But um, Microsoft have kind of come back a little bit, but it was actually going to be switched on by default. And they've said that they're not going to switch it on by default after the security backlash on this. But again, I've had a bit of a rant today. It's my ranty day today, because this stuff, it does, it really, really bothers me that these things are not shouted about a bit more. But Stevie, what do you make of this whole recall thing? Is it something you would see yourself using, or is it a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist?
I have mixed feelings on it, to be honest. I think for somebody like a grandparent or a parent that maybe isn't like super tech savvy and needs to like go back to the way, like go back and figure out what they did at some point to get to repeat that again or something like that. I think there are use cases where having it enabled will be super helpful for a certain segment of Windows users, right? Me personally, I'm not going to use it. I find it worthless. I never would ever turn it on. Um, but there are people where it would be super useful to have it. So I'm glad that it exists for that reason. And I'm glad that Microsoft has responded very, very swiftly, actually, to the concerns of the community when all this stuff came out with that Python script that somebody released that was able to expose data from the screenshots because the database was unencrypted, or it was encrypted in such a way that they could easily get the data across user profiles, right? So Microsoft has come back and they're like, yeah, we're going to turn it off by default. We're going to do all this extra encryption stuff on the database. It's going to be safer. That's all good. But again, personally, I'm not going to use it ever because I don't see a use case for myself for it. Um, but for somebody that's, a grandparent or a parent or something like that, it could be super useful. So I am glad the feature exists for use cases like that.
Yeah, I think it's been mentioned in the chat there actually. Enabling it is one thing, but don't not having it pre-installed at all.
Agreed.
Or as
Yeah.
Microsoft have done here, they have had it. It's part of Windows, but it's switched off by default. Makes a lot of sense. I think the technology is interesting. I think that's quite cool. I just again think that the downside just outweighs the advantages. And it just seems to be, I'm going off again, I'm running, but it just seems to be we've got this narrow vision. Oh, that's cool. It's like the magpies, shiny things. Shiny. Oh, this is great. This is great. This is great. Yeah, but if you thought about the implications to this, and does anybody actually need it? No.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe. So that's the thing. Gary, have you got any thoughts on this privacy violation? Sorry, recall.
I mean, I think Stevie pretty much covered everything I was going to. The only thing I would add is like, what was going through my head is, we're all getting old. You particular, Paul. We're all getting old, right? So as the brain cells start slowing down, having something like this to remember what you were doing last week, I could see something there in terms of, I could just pick up where I left off because it's going to remember things for me. So from that point of view, but that's not to dissuade all of the things that you spoke about in terms of it capturing all the other stuff that you do that you don't want it to remember. So it's how do you tell it, I'm interested in this stuff from a historical point of view, going to keep that for me, but all of this other stuff over here, don't even touch that with a barge pole. So it's finding that balance, and how do you control that? So it's a minefield in terms of what it's going to be able to do and how you're going to be able to control it. But yeah, let's not have it there by default. It's something you opt into, knowing all the edge cases for what it will do and what it can do. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch what they do with that based on the backlash. So it's going to be one to keep an eye on, I think.
Just to kind of wrap that up, one of the articles at the very end of it talked about what Microsoft is doing at the moment, and there's a number of things that they've done this with over the last few months. It's just basically business as usual for Microsoft. They announce a feature, get pummeled for its glaring security failures, then blatantly scramble to control the damage. And it just seems to be thing after thing. I don't know where they're getting the information that this is an awesome idea that should be enabled by default from. I'd love to know what where they're getting that information from. Are they doing surveys? Who on earth are they surveying on this thing?
It's an interesting idea from Fred in the chat there, though, is could it be used or can it be used for keeping your kids safe online in terms of monitoring them and knowing that they've done something or they went to something nefarious? That's an interesting use case. But then you've got the conversation of, well, you're now spying on your kids. So where do you draw the line between? So that's a minefield as well. I can see where you're coming from a being a protective parent, but where is the line in terms of you going too far? So that's a different conversation, but it's an interesting one as well.
There's probably some law enforcement benefits to this thing being turned on too, like potentially for like cyber crimes and things like that. But
then that steps into the discussion between people using WhatsApp to organize the raid that they're going to do, but it's all encrypted end to end. But they should be able to get back doors because law enforcement. That's a whole other question and stuff. Don't get me started on that sort of stuff. Let's veer off of that one. So.
Yeah, you've got enough with me ranting today. I don't think we need Gary as well. Yeah. Okay. Well, we've only got a few minutes left, and I wanted to pick up on one final one, and this is again about AI. I don't want unpacking software to be all AI. That's just not what we're looking for. But this was an interesting one as well because it's very similar to what the Microsoft one is in the sense that I don't believe companies are thinking these things through. And it's about Slack scraping customer data for the AI model training. The problem for me in this one is that there was no communication that this was happening. Now, they could argue it's in their terms of service. It probably is, to be fair. But the big problem I have for this is that all of us, and probably most of the people listening or watching today, are completely jaded by large tech companies. And what they frequently they say one thing and they do another, entirely another, and then they talk about trusted customers and doing it for customers' benefits, and it's not the case when you dig into it. And then they go away and silently scrape the data, the customer data, to train their AI or their large language models. And they don't operate in a clear and transparent way. They're not telling you about it. And then it just leads to more distrust and more jaded customers. And they just, I just don't understand. Well, I do understand. I know it's about money. And then it's about deflating their stock price, and they're shareholders. That's clearly what it's about. But it just feels really disingenuous to continuously tell us that they're doing it for customer benefit. And they tell us it's to benefit customers. It's for to train the models, and then they can use that for customer benefit to search Slack. It just all of it, and it just kind of reads the same thing over and over. They've probably got AI that writes the AI stuff. That's they're writing their marketing scripts using AI because that's all it is. Again, I'm going to stop ranting. Stevie, tell me more about this. How annoyed are you at this, or is it just me?
So I'm super annoyed by it because I can definitely see them like making a ton of money on the back end of scraping that data. And Slack is not the only culprit of this. Like I'm annoyed with a couple of news apps that I use have now started to, when I begin to read an article, it pops up wanting me to give them my email address to unlock the article. It's not going to cost me any money to read the article. They just want my email address.
Mm.
Why do you want my email address? You're going to sell this stupid thing and make money on the back end of this to advertisers. No, you're not having my email address. You can go pound salt.
Yeah.
Like it's not cool. I hate it. Um, so yeah, not super pleased with Slack's decision to do this, and just in general, tech in general, like you don't need my data to provide certain services to me. Now, if there's a value add for me giving you my data for a specific purpose, and you've clearly outlined what that value add is going to be and how the data is going to be used, and like it's my decision to give it to you, I'm okay with that. Like that's totally fine. Whatever. That's on me because I gave you the data that you needed to give me the value added to the service or whatever. But yeah, to just go behind my back and start collecting the stuff and it, not having the courtesy to send me an email
Yeah.
that you were going to do it, to give me the ability to opt out or move away from your services. Yeah, that's a little funny with me.
And I can see the argument there where people say, "But you're reading that article for free. I think the least you can do is give them your email address," and that would be understandable under
Hmm.
different circumstances. The problem is these companies can't be trusted, and I'm not saying they all can't be trusted,
Yeah,
but time after time after time after time again, your email address ends up in some site where hackers have dumped it because here's a dump of everything we got off of this site, or here's the information that they've sold to another third party and that's been hacked or whatever.
yeah,
The companies, so it's not a case of, hey, just give me an email address and what's wrong with that. The fact is that your email address is going to end up somewhere nefarious at some
yeah,
point because they're not transparent, they're not clear, and because of that, people just don't trust them, and it's a sad way we are. With all of these, the large tech companies in particular, it's just disappointing.
I mean, I
Um,
don't like getting emails from Troy Hunt and have I been boned every time he's
yeah.
dropped a new
I'm glad you
data
said
breach.
it.
So
Yeah,
it's
I'm
like
glad you said it because I was going to mention have I been pwned.
it's like the emails you don't want to get is all Troy Hunt's fault. It's not his fault, obviously,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's his service. But no, about this whole thing, the thing about all of this for me was the way. So they enabled it by default. They were scraping all this data, and the way that you have to opt out to it is to send them an email with the information about the Slack account. No,
hmm,
that's a button click that I need to click within the app to turn it off.
yeah,
I don't need no email to be sent. So that speaks to they obviously didn't expect people to want to opt out, or they weren't going to tell people that there was an ability to opt out,
Yeah.
and you now they're scrambling to say, "Oh, we'll send an email to here." And what was it? The wording that was used: "We will process the request and respond once the opt out has been completed." No, as soon as you get that email, you've opted me out, and you're sending me straight back. I'm not in no queue. You remove that straight away. So yeah, that doesn't sit well at all.
It's just increasing friction. A lot of companies do that, because there'll be a certain percentage of people just won't do it, so they'll be able to keep that percentage. So it's increasing that friction. Okay. So we're just a little bit over time today. We had some additional kind of mentions of security vulnerabilities that are coming out. I'm not going to pick them up because we are a little bit over time, but I will put them in the description. We were just going to gloss over them anyway. We weren't going to deep dive into any of them. But it's two things that I wanted to mention is the events that we've gone up that Chocolatey Software and Chocolatey team are going to be at. So we've got PowerShell Conference Europe 2024. That's actually starts on Monday, June the 24th to the 27th in Antwerp in Belgium. If you're going to be there, stop by our booth, Chocolatey booth, for giveaways and to chat with some of the team. And when I say some of the team, I mean myself and James, as we will be there. And you also find some of our community moderators there as well if you're going along. So all the information for that is at psconf.eu. Again, details will be in the description. And Nebraska Code. Date is the 17th to the 19th of July in Lincoln, Nebraska. And stop by again. We're Chocolate sponsoring, so stop by again the booth for a chat with Stevie, who's here today, and Tyler. And all info for that is at nebraskacode.amagala.com. Again, it'll be in the description. And we'll have swag. We'll always have t-shirts and stickers. So that's just a given there for that. So yeah. Okay. So guys, thank you very much. Thanks, Gary, Stevie, for coming along today, for keeping me company, and for if you weren't here, I'd still be ranting about the first one. So I'm glad. I'm glad you're here. But this is the first season of our live stream, so please let us know what you think. I'm going to pop that link onto the screen for our feedback, live stream feedback. Again, if you're listening on a podcast, it will be in the description, but it's ch0.co/stream survey. So please let us know what you think about the content that we are producing. Is it what you want to see? Is it the right format? Is is it you want to see something different? Do you want us to deep dive into different areas? Do you have any ideas about what else you'd like to see? So have your say on that survey. We really appreciate any feedback that you can give us. And to ensure you're notified of all the great content from Chocolatey Software, please ensure you join us on our community hub and Discord. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter or X, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Facebook, Blue Sky, and Twitch. Again, you can find all those links on our homepage, chocolatey.org. Scroll all the way to the bottom and you'll find all those links there, but you'll also find them in the description. Join our next live stream. We've got another live stream coming up at the beginning of July, which is July the 4th. I know that's a special day for everybody in North America, or not just North America, USA in particular. But you can join us on Twitch or YouTube for that on Thursday, 4th of July. It'll be 4 p.m. UTC again. And we'll be going back to basics to look at automating your Chocolatey package updates. So what we did not so long ago was go through how to create Chocolatey packages. Now we're going to look at how to keep them up to date automatically so that you don't have to do much work round about that. It's all done for you. So if you ever wanted to know how to do that, please join that live stream. You can find again the links for that on, and you'll find it in the description below. You'll find our website on there. So you'll be able to find out when that live stream is for you. So we hope to see you there on the Thursday, 4th of July. We will be back on, when is our next one? Oh, I should have got this prepared. So there you go. Amateurs. That's the 18th of July. We'll be back with Unpacking Software. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care. Goodbye.